The large corporations are coming in as they do today. No such thing as a minimum wage law. Or you could pay a worker $1 a day, 20 cents an hour. And by exporting the cheap labor, those natural resources, there are huge profits to be made. We have been in Latin America the new conquistadors, enriching ourselves as those of the old days came and did that. When people day after day live under that kind of oppression, they do what we would do. They organize. They come together at the universities and the tin mines, the workplaces, and they begin to organize. They say, basta, enough. We cannot live like this. We should not live like this. And many people begin to find great strength and wisdom as they gather in their faith communities, the comunidades de base, out of which comes liberation theology. There are many in the church who don't like liberation theology, actually are threatened by the word liberation. And we, of course, ask if our theology is not liberating, para que sirve, for what does it serve? Liberation theology, of course, is a threat to some in power. They prefer to hold on to that very patriarchal, hierarchical model of church. But this theology of liberation is from the poor. They name it. It expresses their experience, rooted in oppression and poverty and struggle. And it's a different model of church. And when they gather and read the Old Testament and the New Testament, they discover a loving God, a creator who does not want them to suffer, who has given their country, Bolivia, and every country, more than enough resources and gifts for everyone to live comfortably. And they know there's no reason why they should live like this. This is not God's divine plan. No, no. And being empowered by their faith and strengthening each other, they walk in solidarity for a better way of life. But when they do, it's dangerous. It threatens that system. And many have to flee. Many are in prison, many killed. In my 5th year, I was among the many arrested, and I had to leave the country persona non grata. And when I came home, it was a difficult time, really. I tried to get back into the country, visa denied. I then went to El Salvador with friends. It was shortly after Bishop Oscar Romero was assassinated, killed for his defense of the poor. In this little country, El Salvador, population 5 million, the size of Massachusetts. It was here that 4 churchwomen who went there at the invitation of Bishop Romero to work with the poor were raped and killed. 2 of their Maryknoll sisters, friends, Maura Clark and Eda Ford. When that happened to the 4 churchwomen, it brought us closer to this little country. And when we went there, we found what they found, this microcosm of Latin America. But far worse than what I found in Bolivia and other countries. How 14 families ended up with 60% of the land. I've never seen anything like El Salvador. It was the slaughter of the innocents. I've never seen such brutality in the military towards people. And it really saddened and angered us as U.S. citizens to go to that country and find our country deeply involved, giving guns and training to those soldiers doing the killing. And that was immoral. It was a crime against humanity. And we came back from El Salvador and we could not shut up. We had to speak out in universities, faith communities. And when 525 soldiers arrived at Fort Benning, Georgia, I and friends stopped talking. And we headed south to Fort Benning, where the Salvadorans are now being trained in combat, meaning more bloodshed in their country. We rented a little house near Fort Benning, called it Casa Romero, and started to organize, giving talks at Auburn, a few churches in the area. And then we said, let us stop talking and bring the message to the Salvadoran soldiers the cathedral in San Salvador the day before he was assassinated, where he made a special plea to the men in the military to stop the killing, to lay down their weapons, to disobey their superior officers telling them to kill their fellow campesinos, and obey a higher law, that law of God that says, "Thou shalt not kill." Bishop Romero was the prophet. He was so much like us, really, in so many ways. When he was made bishop, he was very aloof, very silent, perhaps a prerequisite before one is made bishop. But something happened to this humble priest who was made a bishop in El Salvador. He had this big heart filled with compassion, and he was willing to listen to his people, and he heard their suffering. He began to realize that he was a bishop, and he had power. He had a voice, a very powerful voice. Wow. If only our spiritual leaders of all our different faith traditions could feel that way. There's such silence on Iraq. There was such silence from the days of Vietnam and all these other issues between. What do we say to our spiritual leaders who are silent? Henry David Thoreau said that the biggest cowards he ever met were church leaders. Today, so many of our church leaders have become corporate executives. Our shepherds have become government sheep. And we, if we belong to a faith community, and our priest, our bishop, our spiritual leaders, our rabbi, our pastors are not speaking out on these critical moral issues of today, we should approach them with love and care in our hearts, but be frank and simply ask them, if you do not have the courage to speak out on these critical issues like the war in Iraq, could you have the courage to step down and turn over that office to someone who will speak? Because with that office comes irresponsibility, and Bishop Oscar Romero felt that very deeply. And he got the death threats, and he said, I cannot stop from speaking. And he spoke. He was assassinated. And he inspires that night as the three of us entered Fort Benning, got saluted, went into this high security area near the barracks where the Salvadorans were housed. And with tree climbers, we scaled this tall pine tree. And when the last lights went out, we just said, Bishop Romero, this is for you, brother. And his voice just boomed into the barracks. I must say it was like poking a beehive down there. We saw this as a very, very sacred moment. They didn't quite see it this way. They came out with their guns and dogs. The light spotted us in the tree, threatened to shoot us down if we would come down. It was time to come down. But left the boom box up there with Bishop Romero. Stop the killing. Lay down those weapons. They worked us over, brought in the FBI, questioned us, simply gave the name we had on those military fatigues. Linda Ventimiglia had the name of Donovan, representing Jean Donovan, one of the four church women. She gave that name to the